Hi everyone, welcome to another Collodion chat. So the last one was pretty long, and I'm going to try to keep this one nice and short, just a quick tip. So I want to talk about handling larger plates, because I think most people learn on 4x5, right? When I went to my very first Collodion workshop, I made a lot of 4x5 plates. I've made an instructional video series with 4x5 plates. I think most people, when they're getting started, it's all 4x5 or smaller. And 4x5 is a great size for learning with because it's really easy to hold a 4x5 plate in your hand, right? In one hand with your fingertips without having to squeeze it too hard. So that makes the handling really easy. And something that I realized that I haven't really seen a lot of material on, or really any material on, is what do you do when the plates get too big to hold in one hand, right? So this isn't a super hard thing to figure out. I worked out on my own. I think most people who go to bigger plates probably figured it out on their own as well. But it can't hurt to have a quick overview of the process that works for me. So I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever work this out, but this is how I handle 5x7 and 8x10 plates. I'm not talking about ultra large format here because I've never shot plates that big, but 5x7 and 8x10 I'm now very comfortable with. So let's talk about how to hold them, right? So 5x7 is an interesting size because pretty much anyone can hold a 5x7 plate in one hand across the long edge. I've got pretty typical man-sized hands. I checked with my wife, who's a very small woman, and she was able to also hold a 5x7 plate lengthwise in one hand. So at 5x7, we can still hold a plate this way, but I actually recommend not doing this. So personally, I don't generally hold my 5x7s in one hand by the edges because the fingers are just so wide and the hand is so spread out that I find myself putting a lot of pressure on the edges here. And when you really start to squeeze those edges, that I find is when the pads of the fingers start to kind of fold over and intrude on the collodion film. It's not the end of the world, right? You can avoid really making any big marks on the edges if you're kind of diligent about trying to keep as light of a touch as possible. But for me, it's just too easy to lapse into that hard squeeze and end up making some little, kind of half moon divots on the edge of your plate. So I don't love to hold 5x7s that way. And of course, when you go to 8x10, I don't know if there's any human who has a hand big enough to hold an 8x10 edge to edge. Certainly not across the long direction, maybe across the short dimension, but you're gonna have to find a better way. And so what I like to do with 8x10 plates, and even with 5x7, is I just hold them with this kind of cantilever grip in one hand. So what I'll do is I'll put 3 fingers on the back of the plate to hold it and kind of form a pivot. And I get those fingers as close to the center of the plate as I can to have as little leverage as possible. And then I'm going to have the corner of the plate just kind of nestled nicely in the heel of my hand here. And then finally, I've got my pinky finger and my thumb just kind of lightly resting on the edge of the plate, right? So it's the same thing. I don't want to squeeze these super hard because I don't want to disrupt that collodion film, but I just want to put enough pressure on those that the plate is not going anywhere, right? This is a very stable grip. I can move this plate around, manipulate it, get the drips off when I pull it out of the silver bath, run varnish off of it, whatever I need to do. So that's my kind of go-to grip for an 8x10 or a 5x7 plate. And then if I find myself, for instance, pulling a plate out of the dip tank, a lot of times I'll do basically the same thing, but kind of in reverse, where I end up taking my index finger over the top of the plate, the corner goes into my thumb, and then I rest the other edge on the heel of my hand, which is not as stable as the other grip, but it's good enough to get it out of a tank and then down to drip, out of a tank, right, drip some off the edge, and then I can put this on my work surface and then adjust to a better grip. So real quick, that is how I like to hold big plates, either with this really secure kind of corner grip with it nestled into the heel of the palm, or when I'm pulling out of a tank, I can do this kind of hand behind, index finger on the top, nice and light, thumb on the corner, and the edge nestled into the heel of the palm. And just at all times, try not to squeeze those edges too hard, because whether it's your fingertips, your pads of your fingers, right, or even this, kind of heel of the palm, there's a lot of flesh here that if I start to really squeeze, starts to roll in towards the plate. So however you're holding it, try to keep as light a touch as you can on those edges of the plate until, of course, the plate is, fully varnished and nice and finished. So that's my real quick guide to handling 5x7 and 8x10 plates. And hopefully if you find yourself moving up to some of the bigger sizes, that'll help you out. Until next time, good luck shooting.